Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is Deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On this show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, joint ventures, strategic alliances, real estate, affiliate and sponsorship deals, franchising, and more. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for over 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest Podcast. Let's get started. Andrew Gazdecki is an entrepreneur and investor with a passion for building and scaling software businesses. He founded Acquire.com, a leading marketplace for buying and selling startups, and previously built and sold Business Apps, a mobile app platform for small businesses. With deep experience in M&A and bootstrapping growth, Andrew is focused on helping founders navigate acquisitions and maximize their success. He's an advocate for entrepreneurship through acquisition, emphasizing smart strategic exits over traditional startup scaling. I love that bio. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So, there's so much even within the bio that I want to talk about. And obviously, Acquire.com. And I know in our pre-call, I even said I didn't want to hear the story until we get on the podcast of how you even got that domain. So we're going to go there.
Yeah.
But before we do all that, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because I'm assuming, a tech startup founder and, M&A marketplace guy was probably not it back then, but you tell me.
Yeah. Surprisingly, I wanted to be CEO of a company when I was a kid. Yeah, I got into business super early. I was that kid who sold baseball cards. I was, selling Pokemon cards when people were collecting them. Just always loved business, loved sales. Yeah, and for some reason as a kid, I just thought being a CEO was really cool. So studied everything. In high school, I, made websites for all the bands and would charge for that. I actually had an eBay store that was doing tens of thousands in high school, which is like tens of millions, now.
Wow.
And then in college, I had this funny website where you could buy this like digital gold for this game, World of Warcraft. Anyways, I made like $100,000 in a summer from that. So I was just always like building stuff. And then eventually, the businesses got more sophisticated, had more opportunity to them. And that's when I started Business Apps. And yeah, just love entrepreneurship, love business.
It's funny. I think I don't want to sound like this old guy because I don't feel that way. Well, we're of different generations. And you and I had the same entrepreneurial spirit, right? It was just a very different time when I was growing up, right? There was no internet, there's no whatever.
Yeah.
So so I was 15 and I used to deliver flyers door to door in Brooklyn. And I got my own accounts at 15. I had my friends to deliver them. And, in college, and I was making in that flyer delivery business like $300 a week in the 70s, which was absurd money for a 16-year-old kid. Then I ran businesses in college. All this stuff. I won't go through my whole history. People have heard it before. But I sort of feel like there's such similarity, but obviously you grew up in a time where the entrepreneurial opportunity and in terms of all the online stuff, whatever, was so much greater and, the ability to scale. I mean, it was just a totally different time.
Yeah. And I was just going to add, and that's what I knew as well. I knew because when you look up how recent people made a lot of money, it was always on the internet.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to do. And so I studied every small startup. I read every book I could get my hands on. Definitely, a different time. Definitely a blessing too, to be born in a time growing up with internet.
Yeah. I mean, did you have entrepreneurial models in your family, your parents or anybody else? Or
No, I didn't grow up from too much. And that was a big reason I wanted to get into entrepreneurship. I had hand-me-down shoes and stuff like that. I grew up in a town called San Clemente, which is a beautiful beach town.
Yeah.
And a lot of my friends had really wealthy parents. And my parents, they did well. My mom cleaned houses. My dad painted houses. So more like blue collar. And I'd have friends with just extravagant homes, parents owned businesses. And then that's kind of where I really noticed I'd ask their parents, what do you do for work? Some were business owners, some were attorneys. But that really opened my eyes to money, I guess you could say, where it was much more obvious growing up in San Clemente. And so from a young age, I just knew that's what I wanted to do.
So interesting. I mean, so I also I grew up in a low middle class, family, never weren't poor, the light stayed on, but it was paycheck to paycheck. Although I grew up in a neighborhood like that, so I didn't have the contract. Very interesting. What was your first deal of any type? It could be something small, especially with you, when you were a kid or early in your career, or anything that was a deal that you can remember, first deal.
I'm going to have to say, I remember I sold a lot of baseball cards. I used to collect this guy, Mark Grace. He was a first baseman on the Cubs.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I just thought I liked how his batting stance. And the card shop owner, I eventually made this big catalog of all of his cards, and he was approaching his, I believe it was his 3,000th hit, and he wanted to buy the whole thing. I remember selling that. Oh, another good one is I was really after Randy Moss's rookie card.
Okay.
So, I'd save up money and open up a pack of, football cards. And I actually got his rookie card, brand new, mint condition. And the shop owner said, "Hey, I'll give you," I believe it was $200, which was a lot for me. And I turned it down. And then I went home and then went back and tried to do the deal again. And he said, "Nope, you've taken it home. It's not as good condition." And so I blew that deal up. So those two kind of come to mind. One that I did the deal, and then the other I blew it up.
And when you got a good lesson,
Yeah.
learning experience. I love it. Okay, so talk to us about if it was business apps or whatever. What was your first real entrepreneurial venture? Was it
Business apps? Business apps, yeah.
Okay, tell us a little bit about that journey and you ended up selling that company, right?
Yeah, that was the one that changed my life. And the short story of it, when I first started it, I was in college, the iPhone had just came out. And at the time, I had a job board that connected mobile app developers and businesses.
Okay.
And I kept seeing people make the same job posting where I want to make a mobile app for my restaurant or my hotel. And I'd see these developers charge $50,000, $70,000, $100,000 for pretty basic mobile applications. Back then, it was kind of revolutionary. You didn't know how to make the apps. You didn't know how to submit them. You didn't know what Apple was looking for. And I just had this idea, there's these do-it-yourself website builders out there. Why hasn't someone made a do-it-yourself mobile app builder? And so I had this directory of developers and product specs of different apps that people were looking for, the functionality that these businesses were looking for. And it was over and over the same one. And so I ended up hiring the best developer on that platform, the best iPhone app developer, gave them a spec that 3 different customers had requested and built apps for, made the template, made a web CMS where I can configure everything on the back end. It looked like crap. It was so janky, and it was V1. Launched that, began cold calling small business owners, and I sold the job board for $40,000, $50,000, which felt like $10 million in college.
Yeah.
I remember going out and celebrating that night, and I bought a big watch and stuff. I was young, so I was into that. And yeah, I started cold calling small businesses, and I would say stuff like, "Hey, what's your mobile app strategy?" I'm trying to discuss what you're doing to connect with customers where they are on their mobile devices. And when I call into restaurants, they'd say, what are you talking about? Like appetizers? What's an app? What do you mean?
What year was this?
This was 2010.
Okay.
And it just didn't work out. But I kept building the business. I raised $50,000 from a local investor in Chico. I went to CSU Chico State. And then I had some agencies start reaching out to me. One was this guy in Switzerland. He had built a few apps for these really beautiful Ramada hotels. And I reached out to him and said, "Do you own these hotels? This is awesome." I thought he was like a millionaire using my platform. And I'm 21 at the time, so I'm just trying to get some advice. And he tells me that he's making these mobile apps on behalf of his clients, meaning he owned one of the biggest branding agencies in Europe and worked with hundreds of different hotels and restaurants. And so I asked him, "How can I get you to use our software to build apps for all of your clients?"
Yeah.
And that's when kind of the inflection point hit. He told me if we white labeled the software, and so we apply his branding, so there's no association with our company, Business Apps, he can walk into every single hotel and restaurant that he works with and say, "I'm going to build your mobile app with software that I made." And that allows him to charge his own pricing. So we would charge him $30 a month. He would go to his clients, charge $100 a month, and then $2,000 setup fee to design it, configure it, all that sort of stuff. After that, we took off. We partnered with over 5,000 agencies all across the world. We ended up building more mobile apps than any other company in the world up until the point which I sold the company. We were in every continent. We translated the apps in 50 different languages. And it was a wild ride. I didn't raise any other capital aside from 100 grand, grew it to about 10 million in recurring revenue. We had a ton of bumps along the way. I made a ton of mistakes.
Sure.
If I could go back and relive it, I would. It was the funnest time.
Well,
And sold it to a private equity firm when I was 29. It was an all cash offer.
wow.
I had to stay on for 90 days. And after that,
That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's a big difference with certain, SaaS or the tech businesses that compared to some other industries where you have to stay on a year or two or whatever, right? Before I go to the sale, I want to talk about the PE sale, but you mentioned white labeling, and was that deal structure you did with most of these other agencies going forward as well? Was a lot, yeah. I want to highlight this because I've mentioned this on the podcast in the past, but it's been a while, and I think white labeling is one of the most underutilized deal opportunities, right, for many types of businesses.
100%.
So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, obviously, you had this one opportunity that triggered that, but, talk about, I mean, fundamentally, you said it, a white label deal is where you produce the thing, but somebody else, right, gets to use it, sell it, whatever, under their own brand, right? I mean, that's the very basics of it. But, delve into that a little bit more because I feel like there are so many of our listeners and entrepreneurs out there that there could be white labeling opportunities for their business, but they're not thinking about it or doing it, or they're worried. Some of them like actually actively think white labeling is maybe bad because they want to build their own brand, kind of thing. So talk to me about that journey and that psychology. And I want you to be an advocate because I want people to do this more.
No, 100%. I mean, what I would tell my team is we're not a product company. We're a distribution company.
Yeah.
And that allowed us to sell into hundreds of thousands of small businesses, because the reality of the sale without white labeling for us was it was an in-person sale. That's what I learned is we would have to go into small businesses. We'd have to find the owner you have no idea when he's going to be there. When he is, he doesn't want to talk to you, or she. And then you have to sell them something, and there's sold stuff all the time. You're competing with Yelp. You're competing with Google AdSense. There's 500 different companies. But being able to partner with the person that built their website, does their social media marketing, already has that relationship where they can say, hey, Sandy, we think this is a great addition to what we're already doing for marketing. Would you like to have a mobile app for your business? Here's why. It was so powerful. And I think there's just a lot of, startups where they make a really good product, but they never figure out distribution. They never figure out customer acquisition.
Yes.
And one way to get beyond that is to think of just different paths to do that. It doesn't always have to be directly to the customer. It could be through other partnerships. It could be through reseller programs. It could be through referral programs, but something that allows you to innovate on the go-to-market strategy as much as you innovate on the product strategy. And that's what I would tell my team is, again, we're trying to create as much distribution as we can for this product as possible. And the white label partnerships just opened up everything. Well, the company would have failed without it.
Yeah, this is something, I mean, and there are other structures you can do to leverage this, but, I say, folks say to me, I'm trying to get into this new industry, this new market, this new geography, this new whatever, right? And this is a fundamental sort of difference in mindset that I talk about all the time, right? Yes, there are different ways to try to do that organically, right? You can open offices there, or you can hire more salespeople, you can, right, do that. But I always say, ask this question: who already has access to the market, to the industry, to the type of company, to the demographic, to whatever it is, right? To your ideal customers, right? And you don't even have to worry about the deal structure now. Just answer that question. Now, once you know who that is, it could be a white labeling deal. It could be a strategic alliance. It could be a joint venture. It could be a sales agent or a distribution deal. In different industries, it looks different. But the point is, like, just asking that question of who already has access to the markets that you want to get into and looking for a deal solution as opposed to trying to build that or access those markets organically is so underutilized in general. And white labeling is certainly one of the ways to do that.
Completely. And if you're doing international expansion as well, for us, it was huge because there's regions of the world where everything is completely different. Like in Brazil, I learned that they speak Portuguese, or excuse me, no, they speak Brazilian Portuguese. We translated the app one time into Portugal Portuguese, and that's offensive in Brazil.
Yeah.
And so, they're able to basically tell you the nuances of the market and how it should operate in a way that you'd never be able to do on your own. And you're able to just do it much, much, much faster and at a lower cost too. Like another way to think about it is we had 5,000 plus in-person sales agents all across the world, but we didn't have them on our balance sheet. It was just commission only.
Yeah.
It was a good model.
Yeah, no, it's a great model. It's a great model, which is why I'm so glad you brought it up and highlighted it again. I think it's so underutilized.
Yeah. Do you care if I just touch on like the small downsides? Might
Yeah,
get helpful
sure.
if anyone thinks it's interesting.
Sure, please.
So one challenge we did have was there's not a lot of upsell opportunities. Like you can't directly upsell the customer.
Right.
We had a few feature rollouts where, $10 extra for this amazing customer reviews platform or something like that. We'd have to then sell it to our white label partners and then they'd have to go sell it to their clients. So we do a little bit of selling, but in a traditional, like I own the customer relationship opportunity, you would release that and then the revenue would immediately start getting activated. And the second downside was you don't own that customer relationship. So
That's right.
if they wanted to cancel or move on to a different product, you didn't have a lot of stickiness in those situations. So there are downsides, but the upsides were way more than the downsides.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of the companies that take this approach, again, whether it's through white labeling or some other kind of strategic alliance or relationship with channel partner relationships, there's a million ways that these things are done with other people. And, a lot of them, the shift that they have is that they look at in your case, the white label partners as that's really their clients, right?
Yeah.
Then there's the clients of those agencies that are the ultimate client. And so in terms of what you do to the people you want to keep happy, right, are all the people that direct relationship. And then, sure, you got to sell them and they got to sell. So I appreciate you bringing it up because listen, there's upsides and downsides to every business arrangement, deal structure, you name it, and you got to be aware of it. And you're right. It's just, what's the best fit and does the upside outweigh the downside?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. And listen, there is a wisdom that says, and I think it's a little different here because of leverage, and maybe comment on this before we move on to the next topic. Like some people may equate this, like you hear about this conversation about not only the client relationship a lot in, let's say, social media, right? We have all these people on Facebook or TikTok or Instagram or, whatever, and then the algorithm changes or it shuts down, or the people who had followings on Vine and then all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's the conversation of sort of rented land versus owned land. And there's a lot of push, and I think it's good advice to try to move those people off the rented land, so to speak, into your own database, et cetera.
Yeah.
But I think there is a difference in your model, right? You don't have a single 800-pound gorilla that you're at the expense of, who's going to change their algorithm. The bargaining position is not as unequal.
Well, in a sense, we did. We had Apple. Apple actually banned us from publishing apps one time. So that was a little bit scary. Yeah, because what we were doing was we had basically a templatized app where we would configure your app based on the settings you would put in the web application.
Okay.
Then Apple released a guideline, and Apple's like a walled garden. Like they're very strict to get into. They look at everything. And they had a rejection notice that they released, basically said you can't have templatized apps. Originally, this was made for, this is going to be a little tangent. It was a big moment in my life, but I'll give you the short version. So they basically released this no templatized apps as a way to get rid of all the cloney games. Like for example, you make a game once and then it's Drake's Angry Birds and Justin Bieber's Angry Birds. And it's the same game over and over and over, but for a different artist or, there's tons of stuff like that, just spamming the app store. Yeah. So Apple actually started rejecting all of our apps, all of them, 100%. Like we were banned from the app store. We went through this period of 3-4 months working with Apple. It ended with me actually cold emailing Tim Cook. We built an app for a app that helped with teen suicide for a nonprofit. And there was a video segment of Megyn Kelly working with these kids and like on TV. Yeah. And I emailed that segment to Tim Cook and I said, hey, based on your guidelines, you're saying apps like this shouldn't be developed. It doesn't matter the quality of the app, it's just how it's made. And the reality was if you don't use a templatized app and you're a small business, you can't make an app. It's too expensive. Anyways, one night, Tim Cook opens the email. I see it open in like Cupertino, San Jose, San Francisco. It's a Saturday night. I'll never forget it. And this is when I think like, oh man, we're done. And then Phil Schiller, who is one of the guys that gets up on stage, the huge VP of Apple marketing, emails me back and says like, small business owners don't belong in the app store. Like not a good response. I think he might've been frustrated or something. And I said, all right, well, we're going to do what we can, blah, blah. Long story short, they lifted the ban on Monday. They must have had a meeting about it.
Wow. See, it was funny because my comment was comparing sort of the rent and land comment to your relationship with your white label partners, where it was not as much of an imbalance. But I'm glad that triggered that because, yeah, I mean, obviously, if you depended upon Apple, wow, that must have been scary.
Yeah, we got through it though. I mean, there was a few weeks where I thought, we're like, we can't take on any more customers. They didn't take any of our existing apps down, luckily, but it would have meant no new business.
Right. Wow. Hey, the entrepreneurial journey. As I often tell my clients and other entrepreneurs that I mentor or whatever, and I know this could be a frustrating answer for some, but I always say, hey, if it were easy, everybody would do it.
Yeah, no, that's true. It may segue into the sale too, because it's why I sold the business.
That's perfect. That's where I want to go next. So
yeah, it made me realize like you could lose everything in entrepreneurship and startups like overnight, because this came out of nowhere. We were not expecting it. So when it passed, then I looked for, a buyer for the business. And once I got an offer, I just said, I'm exhausted. Let's sell this thing.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can tell you about an incredible resource my team and I have put together for you. Secrets of Deal-Driven Growth, Creative Ways to Grow Your Business Even in Challenging Times, is a powerful ebook that helps you take DealQuest podcast episodes and apply them to your own life and business. This is the ideal tool for anyone looking for creative ways to grow as deal makers, and you can get yours now. It's as easy as heading to coreycupford.com/workbook and downloading your copy. While you're there, you can also consider joining our dynamic deal-driven community of founders, experts, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. Now back to the show. All right, so we got the motivation for looking to sell between, being exhausted and seeing that the existential risk, right?
Yeah.
To the business. So talk to me a little bit more about that process. Did you use a banker? Did you run a process? How'd you find the buyer?
Yeah.
Talk to me about all that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, another key part of, or another benefit, I should say, of white labeling is you can white label with potential acquirers as well. So we would white label our product for, like, I would chase down companies I think could potentially acquire us. The biggest one was a company called Deluxe. I did work with an investment bank when I was 26. We had an offer from web.com, which I turned down. And we also had an offer from, who was the private equity firm? There's a big firm out in Boston. They acquired Zoom for like 200 million. They resold it for like 600 million.
Okay.
Oh, Great Hill Partners. They offered 30 million for 70%. And I turned that down. I wish I kind of took it. Like, I wouldn't have to go through. This was before the Apple stuff.
Yeah.
So I remember the web.com meeting. They knew that we were going to move forward with a partnership with Deluxe. The idea, I was going to basically partner with both web.com and Deluxe and have them, trying to compete against each other and then get a better offer. It was dumb. I blew up the deal essentially. And then the Great Hill Partner deal, it didn't really make sense. Some other CEO was going to come in. They were going to build it into like an enterprise thing. I would have done well, so I probably should have taken it. But still had gas in the tank, still wanted to keep going. We were still growing pretty quick. It was also a really profitable business. So you're 26 and you got a lot of time on your hands. Why would you sell? That was kind of the mindset. Fast forward about 2 years, Apple thing hits. Fast forward another year, I'm exhausted. But during that time frame, I've been keeping in touch with GoDaddy. I've been keeping in touch with Wix. I've been keeping in touch with, American Express, like just any large company with a huge access to small businesses. But what kind of happened where I think knowing when the time to sell, you really never know, but mobile apps started to trend off, meaning a lot of the technology and usage went to the mobile web. Yeah. And so a lot of the larger companies were investing there. There was a time with larger companies where they were making investments in both because no one really knew what the future looked like. So at this point, the strategics were essentially out. They were just saying, hey, we don't have a need or interest in mobile app development platforms. So out the private equity firms, because they're looking at cash flows and profitability. The multiples are obviously going to be lower, but I wasn't too upset at that point.
Yep.
And then I met the private equity firm previously with the investment bank that I worked with, but I didn't know it. And so when they reached out again and they looked to see how I was doing, see if I'd be interested in selling the business, I pulled up all the NDAs that I've signed during due diligence. And I saw their name in there. But basically they reached out. We had a quick conversation. They requested 5 small items. They were mostly looking at churn cohorts of our top 20% of customers. Do we have any large customers taking up a big percentage of our revenue?
Concentration risk. Yeah.
Yeah. What does churn look like? All those numbers look good and we were still growing. And then they gave a cash offer literally the next day, I remembered. And then we also had, and I structured, the reason I took the offer is they weren't as good as the other offers on price, but they were better on terms.
Yeah.
What I mean by that, it was all cash. We had 2 million cash in the bank. And so I wanted them to buy that as well. So I could attach that to the tax deductions, meaning we could benefit from QSBS. We'd pay long-term tax rather than dividending it out and paying income tax. So they bought the cash, they bought the company. I wanted a quick due diligence process. So they closed within 30 days. They also did something where they put aside $500,000 for me to distribute to my team. It was kind of weird. It was like a blank check thing. I think it was like a small sweetener on top or something.
Yeah.
So I dividended that out to my team, who also benefited from the sale as well. But the main things that made me super happy about it was the all cash at closing, quick due diligence, and buying the cash and allowing us to have a stock sale. It was a pretty decent outcome.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Okay, so how old are you at this point when you sold the company?
29.
Okay, so 29. So you're clearly not ready to go play bingo or golf or whatever, right?
No. No, when I sold, actually, I was like, I remember I had a big moment of like, what do I do now? Like, because I was out of the business and that's all I knew from college. I ran the company from 21 to 29, so 8 years in the company. And then after that, went out and started another company.
And was that this current company? Was it acquired? What became acquired?
No. So I started a second company.
Right.
It was called Altcoin, and it was a cryptocurrency exchange. We were working on a decentralized coin base, essentially, which means when you trade these cryptocurrencies, that you don't relinquish control. It's essentially more secure.
Yep.
What happened, though, is we were making it, and the SEC came out and fined our largest competitor. Because during this time, this is 2017, this was when Bitcoin was like $1,000.
Yeah.
It was like $800. And Ethereum, which is what we were developing the platform with, was deemed a security. And it was just deemed a security. So when we started development, it was essentially a commodity.
Yeah.
When we were about to launch, it was now deemed a security. And so I remember I looked at my team and I said, you guys like cryptocurrencies that much? Because we could go to jail if we launched this.
Right.
So I put in a proactive call with the SEC and said, hey, we're not looking to launch this thing. Just wanted to be proactive. We're not trying to make an unregulated securities exchange. We're just entrepreneurs. So we ended up pivoting the business and white labeling that business, actually. Funny enough. So the thought here was we can't launch this without the proper regulatory licenses.
Yes.
I put in some calls to attorneys, and the quote was basically, $5 million in 2 years to get a broker-dealer license, a money transmitter license. We didn't have that capital. So we either shut down or we can try to sell the business to a company that had the correct regulatory licenses. So I white labeled the company. I said, hey, this is a white label cryptocurrency exchange. You can have a security exchange, a security token is what it was called. And you could launch it with the right regulatory licenses. So we ended up partnering with two companies, launched the exchange under their company with their regulatory licenses. And then one of them bought it.
Got it. How long was that journey?
That was a year and a half.
Okay.
That one was much quicker.
And then was there anything else, or did you get to what's now acquired.com after that?
So after that, I did a small stint as a CRO at this company called Spiff. I got to include this one because I love the story.
Okay.
I sold the company and I said, I'm never starting a company again. That was so traumatic because I thought it was going to be this big thing, bigger than my first startup. And it was just a disaster. We made out okay, but it definitely wasn't what we had planned or what we had hoped, but it worked out. So I reached out to some friends. I said, doing some startup consulting, advising, whatever for free. And I met this company called Spiff that was working on this commission automation platform. So if your sales team does commissions manually in an Excel spreadsheet, it would automate all the calculations in this really beautiful, cool manner. So you can close a deal, close it in Salesforce, and you instantly see how much commission you're going to make. Anyways, they had like 50,000 in revenue or something like that. And I immediately knew that this company could be interesting. So I jumped in there as the chief revenue officer, helped them with their sales process, their marketing strategy, took them to about 2 million in revenue, and then left to start MicroAcquire, which is now acquire.com. But this company, they sold to Salesforce this past year for $450 million. They absolutely crushed it. Yeah, proud of them.
Wow. And did you have an equity piece on that one, or?
I did. Yeah.
Okay, I figured you must have had a piece of it. Yeah, very nice. Very nice. Okay, so let's talk about acquire.com, or what was microacquire.com. Talk to us a little bit about the startup on that. And then, yeah, I definitely want to hear how you got that.
Yeah.
One of the things I said to you in the pre-call was, wow, that, either you got that domain name before you were born, or you paid a lot of money for it. And you were like, well, no, not, I mean, comparatively, maybe neither, but yes, in any case. But talk about the startup of the company first.
Yeah, definitely. So Acquire.com, we're the largest startup acquisition marketplace. We help businesses like SaaS companies, e-commerce companies, mobile app companies, essentially any sort of profitable online business. We have the largest pool of buyers interested in those businesses. We've had over 500,000 buyers registered. We've done over 1,000 transactions and about 500 million. And got the idea because I actually wanted to buy a small profitable SaaS company. Kind of from like all this startup trauma, I just thought, I don't want to chew glass again. I want to buy something with product market fit, handful of customers, maybe like 100,000 in revenue, just getting going. So I originally built the marketplace for myself as like a deal flow platform. Then a lot of people had the same idea as me, and then it quickly grew. Since then, we built tools to automate some parts of the transaction because we'll sell businesses for 50,000, or on the large end for us is about 10 million. But on the lower end, they're too small and there's too many for hands-on support. And so we built tools that help with offer creation for letter of intents, closing documents, asset purchase agreements, flowing into escrow, essentially giving tools to sell your business when there sometimes isn't an advisor available. And then obviously securing a buyer for them as well.
And do deals, how do you track deals closed? Because are they done off platform?
Time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends. So we take our fee at closing. So if it closes using our escrow tools, that's when we'll capture our fee. Because if it goes off platform, we generally will have to chase down that commission. So it's both. The majority will close on platform, but we do see a lot off platform as well.
So how did, so these, it's interesting, right? There's a lot of marketplaces out there in various industries, et cetera, right? Marketplace, et cetera. How did you become the largest in this particular niche? What did you do to get there?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of marketing, time in market too. We've been at this for about 5 years now.
Yeah.
So it didn't happen overnight. So lots of marketing is my best answer.
Got it. All right. So tell us the story about getting the domain.
Yeah. So we originally called MicroAcquire, and I knew that name was somewhat limiting because micro in the beginning kind of signals it's only for small micro businesses. And as we began to move up market and help larger businesses sell, I wanted to drop the micro. So I reached out to the owner of acquire.com and I said, I'd be interested in potentially buying this domain from you. What would the cost be? Are you interested in selling it at all? They replied back saying they'd want 900,000 for the domain, which was way too much for me. So fast forward about a year and a half, when the market started trending down in 2022, they emailed me and said they would be interested in selling the domain, but it needed to be really quick. They wanted 300,000. I offered 200,000. They said 250. I said 200. And we bought the domain while I was on vacation with my family. And I remember coming back and telling my wife's parents-in-law, and said, hey, I bought this domain for $200,000. And I was really excited about it because I thought I got a really good deal. And they were like, you bought a domain for how much? So that's how it happened.
No, I mean, listen, for me, I think that's a great deal.
Yeah, it was. It really was.
Yeah. Acquire.com. Are you kidding me? And how many people would love to have the domain? And listen, obviously you have to be able to run a successful business behind that domain to make a couple $100,000 pay off. But
yeah,
that's so.
Yeah, definitely. As soon as we rebranded from MicroAcquire to acquire.com, we saw a lift on all of our metrics, every single one. Yeah, like our conversion rates increased, our buyers essentially doubled overnight, the buyer registrations and the seller registrations. So it's just like the brand credibility, it's paid off 1,000-fold.
Yeah, really. Really does make sense. So you gave us an overview, but let's dig into a little more. So, who's the ideal seller, for example? It's all on this platform. And then how do they, we don't need a demo per se, but what are the steps that they go and the benefits they get, on?
Yeah, definitely. So let's use this example. A SaaS business doing 250,000 in net profit. That would be a perfect fit for our platform, and upwards from that, and also smaller from that as well. But that's kind of the sweet spot for buyers. And if you're a founder and that's the business you have, you would go to acquire.com. You can create a listing on your own. So we have self-onboarding, where we'll ask you simple information such as a description of your business, when did you start it, Do you have any overview docs? What is your revenue, TTM net profit? You can also connect your metrics, meaning you can directly connect Stripe so we can get a real-time view of your financials and also your search traffic as well. So onboarding takes about 2 minutes. Then after that, someone from our team will reach out to you to give you feedback on your listing. Does it make sense? Should you add things? Do you have any sort of documents, clean P&L, company overview? If you don't have those things, we'll help recast financials. We'll set up a sim for the business as well, where we essentially just interview the founder of the business and ask them a ton of questions. How do you acquire customers? If you were going to reinvest $1 million in the business, where would you spend it? Just to give buyers a lot of information and feel really confident in the opportunity. From there, we plan a marketing strategy, meaning we say we're going to go live on the 1st. We're going to market the business to 100,000 buyers that are in our database and have specifically said that they're interested in acquiring a business like yours. And so we'll reach out to those specific buyers. We call that our targeted campaigns. And then we'll market the business further to strategic buyers as well that may not be in our network. So we're covering all the bases. And then from there, we, based on the interest, will sometimes put out a deal schedule, meaning we'll say we're hoping to get indication of offers by this date, formal offers by this date, and then we're going to select a winning buyer by this date, just to bring some organization to the process as well.
It's like it's an online version of a process a broker or investment banker would run.
Yeah,
right.
It's very similar. Yeah. It's basically productized M&A.
Yeah, fascinating. And then the business model is, so you get paid commission on the deals that close. Is there any other, do people pay to list or pay to be buyers on the site? Is there any?
Yeah. Yep. So buyers will pay a yearly subscription, either $390 or $780 a year. And that's to access deals of a certain size. So below $1 million is going to be $390. And then above $1 million is going to be $780. And then we charge 6 to 8% on the sell side when they close.
Fascinating. And how many deals have closed on the platform?
Over 1,000. We do at least one transaction a day. That's
phenomenal. That's amazing. And in terms of your journey, did you self-fund that? Have you raised capital on this company? Like what's
Yeah, we've raised about $10 million in venture capital for this business. So this is my most capitalized business by far.
Yeah. So talk about that decision. Again, you don't have to give specifics on your particular VCs, but we've had people on, it's a decision to raise capital, right? It changes a lot. You got investors, you got people you're answering to, depending on who they are. They usually have time frames where they have expectations of returns, all that kind of stuff. Tell me a little bit about that decision to raise capital for this one.
Yeah. Well, based on my 2 previous ventures, I wanted to go as big as I could for this one. Swing for the fences, if you will. And I think this one really struck a chord with me in terms of what I really want to do for the next decade, helping entrepreneurs. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. It's super rewarding when you get to help an entrepreneur sell their business and reach that goal they've been trying to get. So that was the thinking, was this is a large opportunity, and I was able to get just the right people involved. And yeah, it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Love it. And again, you don't have to share anything you don't want to, but is there a view on what you think your exit strategy might be?
I don't know. That's a good question. Right now, I'm just focusing on growing the business as much as we possibly can. I think in the next few years, possibly, but I think there's just so much for us to do, especially with the emergence of AI and other types of software companies being created. I always like to say we're just getting started. And I think that's pretty true.
I love it. How much time did you did you have any time off, or did you launch this one right after the other one, right after your second business?
The sequence has been, so when Business Apps was in due diligence, that's when I started Altcoin.
Okay.
I rolled right into Spiff, and then I actually was working on this my last 3 months at Spiff. So yeah, I don't think I know how to take time off.
Right.
Yeah.
Classic, serial entrepreneur will be interesting to see as time goes on. And it's fascinating to me. Listen, having done what I've been doing for many decades and seeing, working with folks like you all the time, sometimes those of us on deals, especially if we know the client well, sort of betting on, how many days or hours it'll take for them to start the next, whatever. And occasionally we get surprised. I remember there was one guy a while back who, like, oh yeah, and he's 15 years in, didn't start another business. No, he was in his 50s when he sold this business, but he still was that consummate, entrepreneur or whatever. And they bought a lot down on the beach, built a new house, and traveled the world, and they went around the country in an RV for a year, like an ice cream, luxury ice cream. That was part of their dream,
Yeah, that's
It's
awesome.
interesting, at one point. But yeah, I mean, most of the time when we bet on the serial entrepreneurs and how long it's going to take them to start the next one, where it's pretty quick.
Yeah, I always say, for some people, like building businesses and entrepreneurship, it's like my hobby. When people are golfing on the weekend or playing tennis, whatever, I'm working on businesses that I have.
Yeah. And listen, that's the thing. If we're blessed enough, some of us ought to find our passion and what we love to do and whatever. I mean, this is not, it's a poor comparison in some ways, but just outlook wise, it's like even doing this podcast, right? I mean, there's a staff that something like 85% of the podcast don't make 15 episodes. Is a term it's called pod fade, right?
Yeah.
People do 8 or 12 episodes or 3 or whatever, and they don't get traction or it's too hard or whatever, right? What they're doing, they're feeling, they think it's going to make them famous or get them whatever. And to me, I love meeting new people and talking about deals. Like one of my favorite things to do every week. And even if we were 6 years in and I was still only having 60 or 80 people listen to an episode, which is what we had when we started, I'd still be doing it. Now we're approaching 30,000 listens a month, these days, but that's not the reason I'm still doing it. I mean, I'm thrilled about that. We get to impact more people and provide access and exposure to our guests to more people. But I just love doing this, right? And I always said I'm the kind of guy, I'm going to either do 0 episodes or I'm going to do hundreds, right? I'm never going to do 12 episodes. If I do something, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to pick things that I enjoy doing. And when you have the freedom and blessing to be able to do that, it's a real gift.
And that's why you're successful too. I'm a firm believer if you don't enjoy what you're doing, you're going to get beat by someone who does enjoy it.
That's right.
I think that's how the world works. Like the people that really enjoy what they do, and I can tell from this podcast and how you interview people, like you really love this, and that makes you just in the top 1%. And I think if you can find that, whatever that is for you in your life, like you're going to be in the top 1%, and that's how you become successful, etc.
I really do believe that. And listen, some people make fun of, the follow your passion advice. And I think sometimes the follow your passion advice comes without also, hey, you better learn how to run a business and how to market and how to build a team and how to, like there's other elements,
absolutely
be successful. So I think maybe that's the oversimplification of the follow your passion advice doesn't work because you do need these other elements. But I do believe exactly what you said, which is that, people talk about at my stage, you have people who are talking about retirement. And I'm like, what am I retiring from? Like, I actually believe in a concept that I call ideal life now. Like, I'm not like sacrificing my life so that one day I can retire and travel or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I travel now. I live by the water. I create a life that I love now. So if I have a life and business that I love now, what am I retiring from? As long as I have energy and I'm healthy and excited and love what I do. What?
I love that. I mean, life's just so short to just do something you don't like to do. I think I learned that early too, is just, you got to do something that you thoroughly love. Because again, if you are, you'll be just really great at it.
Yeah. So before I ask you my final 2 questions, just in your own experience doing deals and obviously in facilitating over 1,000 deals on acquire.com, what are some of the lessons of, whether it's on the positive side or the mistakes that businesses make in terms of, you hear a lot of stories, and it's true that so many companies are not saleable or deals fall apart or whatever it is. What have you seen with this? You have like a big sample size, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of the highlights and lowlights of what you're seeing in this experience?
Yeah, I think the big one for entrepreneurs that surprises a lot is some businesses are just not sellable.
Yeah.
Based on the price or the structure internally or how the revenue is trending, there just is no buyer. Maybe at a price that no one will want. So I think that lesson is, if you can, try to prepare for an acquisition in advance. Try to prepare your books. Clean financials is huge, especially with financial buyers. Just understanding like some of the key deal killers, deal killers. But like customer concentration, if you have one huge customer taking up all the revenue, you need to diversify. That is going to scare every single buyer away. If you're a SaaS business and your churn is really, really high and the revenue is declining, that's going to scare every buyer away. Or if you just price really high out of the gates and you kind of signal to buyers that you're not realistic on valuation, that makes everything difficult as well. So just understanding basics like that, I think you can go a long way. And then ultimately what I've seen is the quality of the business trumps everything. Going back to my first point, you can't negotiate your way or get an amazing bank to sell a bad business. A good business though, you can sell that yourself, arguably, or it just sells itself is probably the better wording. So build a great business is the best way to get acquired.
So, Andrew, if people want to find out more, I always ask, where should people go? Well, obviously, acquire.com is easy.
Yeah. Go to the domain I bought.
Is there any place else they should be looking, or is that what it should?
Just acquire.com. I like posting on Twitter. You can follow me, Andrew Gazdecki. Add me on LinkedIn. Yeah, acquire.com is probably the best stuff.
All right, awesome. Andrew, my final question on the podcast is always about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom around the world, for people from oppression, to why I've been an entrepreneur for decades and haven't had a boss. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
I would say waking up and being able to work on things that get you excited, and being able to work with people that bring you energy. I'm also just a big believer, like I was saying before, is when you're happy and you feel good every single day, you can't put a price on that. So whatever that is, you should go after that. And for me, it's working on things that I think are interesting with people I think are cool.
Love it. Andrew Gazdecki, please, I appreciate so much the value you brought here, the perspective you brought here, your enthusiasm for entrepreneurship, and the platform you've created. I mean, it's a phenomenal platform. Just listen, as an attorney who does larger deals, I mean, it's frustrating for folks who aren't in a position to bring in the investment banker and the high-priced lawyer and also just don't have the access to the consultants even to learn about this stuff. So I appreciate the platform you've created.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. If you are interested in finding out more about my law firm, the services we provide to entrepreneurial and growing companies across industries all over the country, and my partner Brian Megan and I, and my amazing team, just head over to cupforlaw.com. That's cupforlaw.com. And if you want to follow more of my content, head over to my LinkedIn page where I post regularly. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.